All right, thank you. That was
Yeah,
good evening, folks. This is Stayton's Mayor Henry Porter, and I'm going to call a meeting of the Stayton City Council for the 1st of February to order. We have a quorum, and so Alyssa, when you want, go ahead and plug these public comments in.
sure.
Have folks introduce themselves and go ahead on it.
Sure. First up, Steve, you can go ahead and get started. State your name and your address, and then I'll start the timer.
Okay, my name is Steve Poison. I live at 1750 East Pine Street, and I am here as the president of Revitalize Downtown Stayton. Mr. Mayor, councilors, and any staff that might be present, thank you for having me. Since the formation of an arts commission is on tonight's agenda, I want to make you aware of a couple of projects that RDS has had in the works for over a year. First is a sidewalk art project. In November of 2019, the design committee of RDS developed a project to bring whimsical art to historic downtown Stayton. This would serve not only as a surprise and fun item for pedestrians, but could also be used for events such as children's scavenger hunts and that kind of thing. We ran a survey on our Facebook page, which had over 1,600 views and 32 comments, which was huge for our page. And all of them were very positive. We had no negative comments. We got a local artist to design 20 pieces of art that were approximately 12 by 12 inches big. They are all cartoonish and animals doing various things, some appropriate to the buildings they would be near, some just generally kind of fun. We brought this idea to the city administrator and asked him what would be required to proceed with this project. And while Keith said he wished there was an art commission that could get involved in this kind of thing, there wasn't at the time. So he set the following requirements for us. One, that we contact the Public Works Director for any safety issues that might come up. Two, that we got permission from each business owner, which we did, from 20 business owners. Three, we get permission from each building owner. And four, that the city council would need to approve the art for appropriateness and non-offensive content and that kind of thing. We submitted the materials January 18th to the city to get approval from the council. The second is a banner project for 2nd Avenue. We got permission from Pacific Power to use its poles on 2nd Avenue to expand our Walk of Hearts. We raised money to purchase brackets, got a graphic designer to design banners, received a grant from MCDC to purchase the banners, and the banners are meant to be installed when the hearts come down at the end of February. We hope we can proceed with this original plan since the Art Commission ordinance was not in effect when we initiated application. If you do ask the staff to form an Arts Commission, I hope it can be grandfathered in under the rules in effect when we did the projects. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Steve. Okay. Okay, Alyssa, who's next?
It is David here, and it looks like he is popping on. And
Yes. Hello. Well, yeah.
state your
Yes.
name and your address, and we'll step
Absolutely.
away.
Absolutely. Yes. I'm David Giglio, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the State and Sublimity Chamber of Commerce. I am a board member there and a member of their Government Affairs Committee. And I just want to thank the mayor and the city councilors for having me tonight. I am here tonight to voice our board's support of Resolution 1016, and also to add our written and verbal testimony to tonight's meeting. We are in full support of the resolution, and we feel like it is a very good first step to help support restaurants and those businesses who have been hurt most by this COVID lockdown. This week, we have also ratified our support of join many other chambers throughout the state and the Oregon State Chamber of Commerce in supporting the Main Street Matters campaign, which reaffirms our support of small businesses and the inadequacy of the response by our state government. And so we thank you. In light of that, we thank the council for this response. However, what we are asking for is that there be more added to this particular resolution. And we have proposed the following changes in the written testimony that we've supplemented you all with tonight. The 5 things that we would like to change, question, or recommend come down to removing the line G about sidewalks and allowing sidewalks to be used as dining space, as long as there is consent of the city and there's sufficient space that's allowed for pedestrian foot traffic. We also want to encourage the city to offer the temporary use of city barricades free of charge to restaurants to really just help alleviate some of that additional operating costs to our businesses. We'd also just want to make sure that the fire department has been included in all these discussions and has committed to the 1-day turnaround time that is talked about in section 9 of this resolution. We'd also ask the city to consider, should they be approached by businesses, the temporary closure of side streets adjacent to eating establishments for the purpose of downtown dining. All of these are laid out in more detail in the written testimony that we have provided, but I think that they go a long way to really doing everything we can to support those who are struggling most during this time. Our chamber has provided over $68,000 along with the Rotary to these businesses to help meet the different needs that they've had to, the changes they've had to pivot with during this lockdown. But these changes continue to make it hard for these businesses to continue to pivot. And so we ask the city to join with our small business community and our restaurants to doing everything they can in their power to provide flexibility and to allow them to open up to the greatest degree possible under the legal restraints that are currently in place. I thank you for your time, and I ask that you consider our testimony that has been provided.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
All right. Next up, we've got Crystal, and it looks like there she is. Hi, Crystal. Let's see, you're muted. There we go.
There we go. Hi, I'm Crystal Wolf. My address is 1723 North 3rd Avenue. I am here today on behalf of Mecca Moms and you. As you guys know, Mecca Moms have been serving the community for over 20 years. There's with this COVID and everything, it has made us very hard to stay open. We've been shut down for almost 3 months. And as you know, a lot of other businesses downtown are struggling with the same barriers that we are. And so we, in case you guys are not aware of it, but we submitted a video about a week or 2 ago showing, asking for a couple of parking spots for Mecca Moms to be able to use so we can have outdoor eating. I've noticed in Salem and downtown Salem and downtown Portland, other cities have allowed other bars and other restaurants the same as well. We're asking. Really, we are well aware of the liabilities that may come up with having these outdoor seatings, and we're prepared to face any of them by following OCC guidelines and city guidelines. This is just a temporary fix so that we can get our employees back to working and back to serving the community. And that's it.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Alyssa, what else have you got?
That is it for public comment this evening.
Okay. Well, then, let's go on into our meeting. First item, our consent agenda for January 19th. You folks had a chance to look at that and see if it meets with your approval. And could we have a motion to approve that, please?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented. This is Councilor Patty.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Is there a second? Ben, is that a second? I thought I heard a second.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Would you go ahead and poll the council on that, please?
Sure.
Melissa?
Sure. Counselor Mullen?
Yes.
Counselor Ort? Oh, you're muted, but she said yes.
Yes.
There she
All right.
Counselor McDonald?
Yes.
Okay, and Counselor Patty?
Yes.
All right, motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. First item this evening in general business is an item called homelessness, and that's a court case, Martin versus the city of Boise. And is Keith there, and is he going to take this, or?
He is, and I just need to get this so that you guys are just seeing that. Okay.
So this is information.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Play musical chairs here. Hello, everybody. Thank you for giving me the time. I'm going to treat this a little bit like a work session. So as we go through, feel free to stop me to ask any questions to go through. Really what you guys asked about is homelessness. And I think the starting point we're going to focus on is this right here, Martin v. City of Boise. We're going to talk some legal aspects. So just to set it out, the goal of this presentation is to provide a framework for what actions the city can and cannot take in response to homelessness and individuals in our community. We're going to talk a lot about the law. I need to preface this by saying I am not an attorney. I'm here playing one tonight and playing one in this conversation. What I can say is that I have been in communication with several attorneys, looking at case law, looking through information to try to provide as rich of conversation as we can have. The other thing in my PowerPoint here I want to say is everything discussed tonight is Exhibit A in legal action. So I just want to remind everyone that when you speak tonight, if there is any lawsuits that come from any action the council takes, you should anticipate that what you say will be and can be used in court. So I just want to provide that little caveat as we have this conversation. And also I want to say this is an evolving legal area of the law and challenges are ongoing, and we're going to get into that a little bit. I'm going to apologize too because I'm going to break some general rules of what you should and shouldn't do in a PowerPoint presentation, which is, one, I'm going to read the PowerPoint and it's going to go a lot through what the council memo talked about as well. I'm doing that just for the people at home who haven't read the memo or people who may watch this later on trying to have an understanding of the impacts of Boise and so that they have an understanding of that as well. So the basics are this: the city of Boise enacted a camping ordinance which was defined as the use of public property as temporary or permanent place of dwelling, lodging, or residence, or as a living accommodation at any time between sunset and sunrise, or as a sojourn. The ordinance prohibited the use of any streets, sidewalks, parks, and public places and camping at any time. So this is the basic of what the city of Boise did in terms of what they call the camping ordinance, that really was geared towards homeless individuals in their community. So there is some differences that we need to talk about when we talk about Boise and other locations, which is what the city of Boise provided in lieu of or in defense of, if you will, their camping ordinance was sheltering alternatives that satisfied adequate, what they refer to as adequate shelter. So in essence, what the city of Boise said is we had ordinance on the books that prevented camping. Yeah. Oh, I thought I heard somebody call my name. So they had the shelter in place in lieu of this. So what they said is we have an alternative. But a couple of the things I want to talk about in the shelters, and we're going to get into this even a little more detail later on, is the shelters had limited capacity. The shelters would have limits on length of stay. And the shelters had what we classify as a conditional requirement to use the shelter, such as passing a drug test or promulgation of religious doctrine. So this becomes important later on, and really in another court case we're going to look at has issues of what you can and can't do, and why some of these limitations I just expressed weren't able to satisfy adequate shelter in terms of the court's opinion. So the bottom line is the Ninth Circuit ruled in favor of Martin, and here's what they basically said. The government cannot criminalize being homeless or criminalize conduct that has unavoidable consequences of being homeless, namely sitting, lying, or sleeping in the streets. So what the courts basically said is, Boise, you cannot make being homeless in and of itself a criminal act. And this is really going back to previous case law, which is looking at the Eighth Amendment of the Constitution, and the validity of any ordinance as it relates to that will depend here, and I'm quoting the court again, as on whether it punishes a person for lacking the means to live out of the universal and unavoidable consequences of being human in a way that the ordinance prescribes. So what Martin basically argued was an Eighth Amendment violation of punishing them for things that are unavoidable consequences. And so this is what the court is basing their decision on. So the Ninth Circuit noted that its ruling is intended to be narrow in scope. In an opinion, the court noted the following. Cities are not required to provide adequate shelters for homeless persons. It may be possible for an ordinance to prohibit the obstruction of public right-of-ways. And the ruling does not apply to people with access to adequate shelter, but choose not to use it. And this is going to come up in another case law. But adequate shelter would basically, and I'm putting the little asterisk here, be defined as having enough availability for everyone who wants it, and to have no conditions on what it takes to be accepted or any time limits of people to be able to use that shelter. And also, according to a more recent case law, would also have to have HUD approval. So HUD would have to come in and designate it as an adequate shelter. So also I want to just kind of note here that Martin v. Boise does not impact the rights of private property owners, notably if campers do not have permission or authorization to be on private property. So private property owners still have the right to enforce on their private land to prevent people from camping. This is really focused on public property and public right-of-ways. So we talked about the Eighth Amendment. I'm going to go into a little more detail here. So places limits or restrictions on the type of behavior that government may criminalize. A noted example comes from Powell v. Texas, a 1968 case where the courts ruled that the Eighth Amendment prohibits punishment against an individual for an involuntary act or conditions if it is unavoidable consequences of one's status or being. So what Martin v. Boise really looked at was this stare diocese of the precedent that's been set in this notable case law on Powell v. Texas, which is a Supreme Court case, on the Eighth Amendment protection that individuals have. So what they're basically looking at is, again, the Boise ruling, the camping ordinance, prohibited or punished people for an involuntary act as an unavoidable consequences of their status of essentially being homeless. So in December of 19, the Supreme Court denied a petition from the city of Boise to review the Ninth Circuit decision. So for all of you non-court geeks, what this basically means is city of Boise petitioned the Supreme Court to take up this case and to rule on it. The court denied that petition, which essentially means the Ninth Circuit's decision stands and is currently the case law regarding this matter. And again, this goes back to, in effect, this holds up just the basic understanding here that homeless persons cannot be punished for sleeping on public property in the absence of adequate alternatives. I do want to go ahead and talk about, and we can do this a little bit more, some other things in terms of adequate alternatives, looking at a future case law, and we'll talk about that in more detail, that has to be within the city limits as well. That's another requirement that seems to be put in place on another court case. So we have a case here in Oregon that's really challenging this. This is Blake versus the city of Grants Pass. We are aware there's a couple other cases coming out. Creswell is one, and there's another case coming out. But this is the one that really went into, we were looking at for the last year. So the city of Grants Pass created a system of fines for homeless individuals in the city. According to a public statement by the mayor and documents in the case, the purpose of the fines was to make it uncomfortable for homeless to be in the community and to encourage them to move elsewhere. So we talk about those public statements, kind of where my warning is coming from, and this is an example of what the courts looked at of public statements and documents in the case of the intent of the law that was in place. I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but just for information, the parties were primarily arguing about the difference between the involuntary act of sleeping or resting and the voluntary act of maintaining a campsite for an extended period of time on public property. The two sides also argued about whose burden it was, the government's or the homeless individuals, to prove that the person residing on public property had nowhere else to go. The second component of this, I just want to say that my rulings or my readings of this in my conversations with attorneys, it really looks like the burden is not on the homeless individual. The burden would be on the city to prove that they would have no other alternative. So here's where I'm going to, again, do something terrible for a PowerPoint, but I'm just going to go ahead and sort of read Judge Clark. So Judge Clark was the federal judge that ruled on Blake versus City of Grants Pass, and some of his, basically I'm quoting what he said in this and talking about what his opinion said in this case. And this was completed in July of 2020. Judge Clark's opinion can only be interpreted as requiring all cities and counties to carve out exceptions in their ordinances where the homeless can lawfully engage in sleeping without risk of enforcement. While technically only applicable to jurisdictions that have more homeless than quote-unquote available shelter, the manner in which the number of homeless and the other options available are calculated leaves every jurisdiction subject to the same scrutiny as Grants Pass on these legal issues. So again, what this is basically saying is the burden falls on the city to have adequate shelter and to make sure that everyone has access to that adequate shelter based off of some of the conditions and requirements I put in earlier. Judge Clark also determined that a monetary fine of any amount against the class of involuntary homeless individuals where no other alternatives are provided would be excessive under the Eighth Amendment. So this is going back to what one of the key components of Grants Pass case was, of finding homeless sort of as an encouragement to move on or a discouragement to be in the city. And Judge Clark said that that would be excessive based off of the Eighth Amendment. Judge Clark still allows for citations to be issued to homeless individuals for littering, harassment, urinating, and defecating in public. He felt like these were tools, and that's his word, in the local government's toolbox. And this is based off of CIS and based off conversations that we've had. One wonders, however, if such citations might also be challenged as equally involuntary aspects of being involuntarily homeless. So I think this is a part of the case law that is still yet to be decided. It's something he put in this case, but again, if we're talking about people not having shelter and being allowed to camp, same type issue of what do we do in some of these cases where they may have no choice. Again, I'm not going to get into the weeds with this too much. I just want to point out that that could be a challenging aspect of what still fall under that Eighth Amendment requirement. So Blake versus City of Grants Pass is currently on appeal, and right now they're expecting the appeal will take 2 years. And again, this is sort of an evolving area of the law, and legal challenges are already occurring. So one of the things that we wanted to do tonight was first to have a conversation about the case law, what we can and can't do as a city, to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions or to have an understanding of what we have in place in terms of the legal requirements. The next component is we'll ask the chief to come and give a presentation on currently what our police department is doing. And then if needed, we can have a third conversation about alternatives or options we can have as a community. What we really wanted to do tonight was to talk about what some of the current case law is and the challenges that are facing. I also hope that people who are watching this will maybe understand why in some of these bigger cities you're seeing some of the challenges they're having, whether it be Salem, Portland, Eugene, those are the ones that come up most common. But this is the reason why this case law, this issue with Martin v. Boise is really kind of not only in Oregon, but throughout the Pacific Northwest and even the rest of the country become a challenging issue. So this is what I just said in an upcoming meeting. The police chief will provide strategies and policies of the Stayton Police Department addressing working with the homeless in our community based on the legal framework that we have. And the legal challenges that we would have in enforcement or actions. So that's a lot. I'm happy to answer any questions or to try to shed light on any issues that you have based off of that conversation. So please feel free to to shoot questions or ask, or any clarifying that we can do, please let me know.
All right, thank you, Keith. Somebody want to start with a question?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, go ahead, please.
Keith, can you just, thank you for that. There's a lot of information to take in. But can you just reiterate what you were saying about at the beginning? You're saying whatever we say in this meeting right now could be used against us in a court of law. Is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't say used against you. I would say quoted, right? I would say
Okay.
would be part of the record, if you will.
Okay.
So it's just an understanding of trying to make sure. We're seeing a lot of litigation coming from these issues. Creswell, and let me look over and ask a question. Dave, what was the other one? Medford is the other one. That's just in Oregon that we're aware of. So as cities are trying to grapple with, I think, the expectations of the community to address this problem and the legal limitations and challenges that are in place, this is kind of what you're trying to see. And we talked about the Grants Pass issue. That's the case that would probably eventually get to the Ninth Circuit, but we're seeing at this time it would be several years before we would anticipate that moving forward. So.
Okay. And I have another clarifying question. So we have a sign, and I mean, I see them all over, but we have signs that say you're not allowed to be in the park after dark and you're not allowed to camp in the park. And from what I'm understanding, though, you're saying that if somebody is involuntarily homeless, and I guess you'd have to figure out how that is designated.
Right.
I mean, I'm being truthful, but how that's being designated if you're involuntary homeless, that doesn't apply to that particular person.
Yeah, I mean, what Judge Clark basically said is that the cities need to carve out exceptions to any sort of ordinance if someone is in an involuntary consideration. One option that is being tried in other communities, and this would work, would be to designate one area of public property where people could go. So you say, here is an area where people can go. That would create some other challenges. The city of Salem is dealing with that as well. But that's some of the things that you're seeing other communities trying to do, is saying, instead of allowing it in any public property, we're going to designate areas. But that again comes with its own challenges and own issues as well. So that is an option that you can do. And the other option really at this point is to provide adequate shelter, which would be, again, going back to those conditions that have sort of been set out by the courts at this point, enough for everybody, no conditions in order to be there. So no drug tests, no promulgation of religion doctrine, would have to probably be HUD approved now as well. And so, to have those kind of resources available could be challenging. And really, I didn't get into this, but, Martin really came about because people were in shelters, but either they had run out of the amount of time they could be in there, so that they had to be out for X number of days before they could go back in, or they didn't want to be subjected to the drug testing or the expectations of any sort of religious expectations placed on them. And the courts have ruled that they agree with that as well. Judge Clark's ruling with the Grants Pass, it basically also says that services need to be inside the city limits, or else it would essentially be too burdensome, and that's my term. I don't remember if he says that or not, but that basically means that services that would be available in Salem would not be something that would qualify. Not that someone wouldn't take those or we couldn't use those, but I can say that even with issues we've dealt with here, we've had individuals we tried to work with who refused to go to Salem. So under this, we couldn't qualify that as alternate shelters or uses based off what the court said. It would have to be something that we'd have inside our city limits.
Keith, question from this end.
Mm-hmm.
How often are staff meetings, how often does the topic come up of homeless in our community? Is it a constant thing? Is it more often?
I would say we have about a half dozen the homeless that we've dealt with on a semi-regular basis. There's been a couple that have been prominent more recently. We've had success in and a couple instances of getting people assistance. There's one individual right now who, and I don't want to get into too much information, but who basically doesn't want assistance, won't take any assistance. Assistance that we provided, basically that individual has given away, camps, sleeping bags or any efforts or attempts to try to get them into, some sort of shelter or alternate housing, or to get them into some sort of waiting list for assistance. So, there is situations where a person just won't, under any circumstances, take assistance. We have had some instances where we've had some success. There's been challenges with that as well. So, it's an issue that we deal with on a quasi-regular basis, but I would say we don't have the homeless problem that other communities at this point have. It's more trying to follow the case law. Hold on, I'm getting an error message. Can everybody still hear me okay?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So, it's really trying to follow the case law and to look and see what other communities are doing. With a community our size, with limited resources, it creates additional challenges as well.
All right, thank you, Keith.
Mhm.
Somebody else?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Patty.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Keith, as far as you've done a great job of explaining kind of some of the legal challenges here, and then also the alternative of designating a location and some of the issues with that. Have you heard any other best practices from cities that have been more successful in mitigating this issue and what they are doing, aside from what's already been reviewed here?
David, the next city that has a successful way of dealing with the homeless will be the first one. And I'm not trying to be flippant. I'm not trying to be dismissive. We were talking about an area out of Texas. I would say that they're having a little bit of success. It's a different type situation. It's a different type story. But what you're seeing and the challenges that you're seeing, and we can use Oregon as a better example here, in Salem, in Portland, in Eugene, are kind of indicative of the limitations based off of the Martin v. Boise, and the resources and allocation of resources that are available. And so this really is a problem. To take your question, Hank's question, the mayor's question, beyond just as a staff, this is a question that's become big in OCCMA and the Professional City Manager Association and ICMA, the International City Managers Association. This really has become a problem that isn't just Oregon based. It is really throughout the entire country. And especially in bigger cities, it seems to really be an issue. So, there's real challenges that all these cities are facing. And so far, I think we call this an adaptive work problem where there's no solutions, there's no best practices. But it really is a really challenging issue. And we could look no further than Salem to really see how difficult and challenging it is in trying to balance kind of the wants of the community and the legal ramifications of recent court cases, or even Grants Pass for that matter.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else on this?
Keith, I do have a question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So what are we? So we have these areas that I'm thinking about areas in Salem that you can no longer. I would not feel safe walking around to and fro in different areas. So what are our obligations to our other members of the community if, say, I'm going to use Pioneer Park again as an example, but that is an area that is a public space for everyone. What are our obligations to the other community members who are essentially stakeholders in that piece of property as well, through their property taxes and such, the bond as well, to make sure that that's a safe environment for them and their family members to access that area as well, if it's overrun by homeless people?
Yeah, I mean, the options that you would have at this point, because, Councilor, Ort, to go back to the question, this goes back to what the court has basically said, which is the court has said if someone is involuntarily without shelter, you have to carve out a place for them to use public space. You cannot, under the Eighth Amendment interpretation, you cannot punish them or take action against them. So the options that are available right now are to designate one area as a space, and that's going to create other challenges. The not in my backyard arguments, and then I don't want to get in too much information here because it's not my place to say, but there's been challenges for places that have tried to designate one area to do that, or it's to provide adequate shelter for these folks with those conditions that were met, and that would be a pretty expensive obligation as well. And so, what you're basically asking is something that, as of yet, the courts have said we can't do. And if we take those kind of actions, what you would be seeing would be lawsuits against the city. And so far, the courts have not been receptive to things that communities have tried beyond the remedies that I just described. And I think this is why we're having this conversation, right? Because these are the limitations and these are the challenges that we're facing and other communities are facing in terms of trying to address it. You're asking the community would like to avoid having to deal with these issues. I understand that. The courts are saying you basically have no choice without other considerations.
Well, Keith, one other question.
Yeah.
In trying to offer help instead of punishment or restriction, what comes to me is this idea that we haven't shed our basic humanity, and maybe we just keep trying to help and not focus on restriction. Maybe I'm going in the wrong direction on this, but I just think we need to keep doing what we're doing.
Well, I mean, I'll say this, that I think the police department has done a really good job, and other staff members as well have done a really good job of having communication with the homeless that they're seeing and working to try to see if there's family or friends that can offer assistance. We've had, at least one case that I can think of specifically where we had success on a family member that was able to help. Unfortunately, many times these individuals don't have a relationship with families, or the families are at a point of just saying we can no longer help. We've also tried to work, and our police department has done a great job with this, of trying to get people into resources in Albany and into Salem with some success. Sometimes that takes time and energy. We've had success in a couple of our homeless finding temporary shelter for them. Unfortunately, the temporary shelter will run out. They'll come back. We kind of repeat the cycle, and that's been going on for a while with at least one couple I can think of. So, we try to work with them to find solutions that are in place. But, we had an incident with one camper who was very familiar with Boise and stated that and didn't seem to want help. So, there's limitations on what we can do there. After the chief talks, if you guys want to talk about what some of the solutions are, I've kind of laid out what they're going to look like. It's the shelter, or it's the designating a location, and we can get legal counsel more involved just to make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's. But there really is a limitation, and that ruling out of Grants Pass, and even Martin, really does kind of let cities know here's what the expectation is. And there are a lot of advocates for homeless, and they look for they look to make sure that the laws are being followed.
All right, thank you, Keith. Was Chief going to make a presentation this evening?
Well, I mean, he's happy just to add something, but I think we're going to have him come, and he's got a memo he already has even typed out. I really wanted tonight just to talk about what the limitations are, to let you guys think about that, and then to discuss some of that. We got into a little bit. I hope I didn't say anything that he's going to go, I need to correct Keith on something here, but I'll let him come over and jump on the screen here and just add what he would like to add. So let's play musical chairs. Oh, he's going to jump on there.
Good evening, everybody.
Chief.
All right, we'll try again. Nope, on.
He's heading over here.
Evening, everybody. Good to see everybody. So I could see the concern on everybody's face with this, and the comments from Councilor Orr and Councilor Patty. These are the same questions that we're seeing in law enforcement throughout our state, throughout our country. These are conversations that are having with the Chiefs of Police Association, just all over. How do we work with, our job is to work within the law, and work with the courts and what they ask us to do, as well as try to create a safe place for all, in the best abilities that we have. Not to get into too deep, because I do have a memo that I did write up for Keith to give to you guys for the next meeting. We're working diligently with other command staff throughout the region on what they're doing to try to see what we can do. We're taking a holistic approach right now as a police department with the folks that are in our community that are unsheltered. And that's everything. That's us from basically working as a social service part of our department, to connect them to other resources when those opportunities present themselves. And oftentimes that's a daily encounter, constantly, and lots of hours to find these people when they finally have that moment of, I want help. And then on top of it, it's also holding people accountable for their actions. As you saw in the ruling that Keith talked about and stuff, there are other things that they do that could be enforceable. So as Councilor Orr had mentioned about the park, what do people do and stuff? If they're seeing criminal activity, that criminal activity is still held by the court for us to handle and deal with, and if needed, to cite and or arrest, or if that deemed necessary on their action, not just being homeless by itself. So I think those are things you have to sort of segregate and separate between the two. So we're taking a real holistic approach. We've done counts. Last year's count with Arches, there was, they think, about a dozen or so unsheltered in our community. The other thing I would say is a lot of the people who are unsheltered in our community have connections to our community. Routinely, the people that I have personally talked to, as well as our officers, they have connections here. They have connections in the canyon. They have connections to this area and to us in those weird ways. You know how we're just removed from each other only so many places. So we have found success through this, and again, it's a holistic approach. But it does take a lot of hours, takes a lot of time, and takes a lot of patience and education. I think that's part of the thing here that Keith's doing, too, is try to educate everybody. So when you're approached by folks in the community and stuff, that we can start showing people the reasons why. It's not that we aren't trying, that we actually are. So hopefully I was brief on that, but just to let you know we are working diligently to try to curb and help everybody out that we encounter, from our tax-paying people who live here, as well as those people who are traveling through our community, who visit here, who play here, all those things. When they're here in our jurisdiction, in our area, they're our responsibility to take care of. And that's part of the mission that I've given to our staff, is to treat everybody that way. When they're here, it's our responsibility. So we're doing the best we can, and take enforcement action when we can, and try to get them the resources. So, any questions real quick at all?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, Counselor.
Chief, can you tell me, do you know how many of the maybe current homeless people that you have spoken with are homeless from the wildfires? I know we've talked about that, but that was when it was a little bit more fresh. And so do you know?
Yeah, of the folks that we're working with, a couple are. In fact, actually, we have one of our successes is actually somebody that was displaced from the wildfires or up in the canyon, and because of the resources, we've expanded our knowledge base because we're so close with the Linn County border. A lot of the folks that we live with, or come through here, are through both counties. So we were actually able to reach out to Linn County and found that we had some additional resources that we haven't used in the past. So we were actually having a success story with that, where we were able to get somebody into some temporary shelter and hopefully the help that they would need and to get them moving forward in a positive way. So we have
Thanks.
had a few. You bet.
Thank you.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
All right. Others?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Patty.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to take a quick opportunity to commend you, Chief, for the holistic approach. I feel like that based on what we're hearing tonight and not without hearing your presentation that we'll hear in the future, that sounds like the best way to do this because this all seems like legal quicksand to me. So just off the top, I appreciate what you're doing and it sounds like it's the right way.
I appreciate it. And I'll be honest, everybody, it's a moving target. It's constantly going to be changing. There's going to be appeals. There's probably rulings that are going on or court cases happening in other jurisdictions that we just haven't heard about yet. So it's something that we just have to be flexible with, be cautious with the actions that we take. And again, we're taking a holistic approach, and I think that's what most agencies are doing. It may not be as readily told everyone that, like Salem, I know they have a whole team that's what they're doing. The police department is really trying hard to get as many people into services and get them on a different path if possible. But again, that is choice, and we live in a country free of that choice. So those are where we start having those difficulties. So.
Okay. All right, others?
Mr. Mayor, I do have a question. So, kind of back to Keith's presentation. So I don't know, Chief, if you want to answer this or Keith, but something that he said, the judge said that, and you had said, you still have to follow the law. So defecating in public, harassment, littering, those type of things. But if we have, so I'm going to go back to the Pioneer Park because that's the example that I've been using, but there we have trash receptacles. There's also restrooms available up until 8 o'clock at night. So I don't know if you could call those reasonable accommodations for someone who, doesn't have somewhere else to go, because they're without shelter. So, is it reasonable to think that if you have those, that those should be used as opposed to, the other things that I stated?
I think what you're looking at is actions again, what people's actions are. And that's what you're looking at, criminal mischief. Those are criminal offenses, potentially offensive littering, the defecations, that kind of stuff. Those are things the courts have given us those tools to use when necessary. So when those occur, that's something, and we can prove those cases, and it deemed it necessary with the officers on scene at that moment and with the information they have, and they feel that's the best choice of action, then we do have that authority still to do certain things. So it hasn't taken away the criminal offenses, if that makes any sense. If somebody was harassing or somebody was graffitiing up a wall or in the bathroom or cutting up something, those are things that are criminal offenses that the courts have allowed us to say, no matter what your status is, sheltered, unsheltered, that's still a criminal act, and we can still take action with that and make that person appear in front of a court, and that's what the whole arrest process is, to then basically be heard and face their accusers for that criminal offense, and then let them rule on whether or not that they would be found guilty of that offense that we saw at that point in time. Not just surely that they're just sleeping against a tree at Pioneer Park and they're disheveled and that kind of thing. That's not going to be a criminal offense, and that's going back to making it illegal under the Boise ruling. Does that sort of help a little bit?
Yes. So like someone screaming obscenities at me and my children in the park, that's because that's happened.
I know.
And
That's not going to fit under a criminal statute.
Oh, that's not going to fit?
No. Just
Okay.
yelling obscenities, no.
Okay.
So.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay. Chief, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And we talked a lot about today, so if I shorten up my presentation later in some aspects, but you have at least an idea of what we're doing as a police department to help everybody out within the community. So I appreciate the time.
Thank you. We'll do this again.
All right.
All right. Keith, anything else this evening on that topic?
Only if there's any more questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay.
I have one, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
And this is probably just a point of clarification, I guess. Is there a difference in the actions a city can take depending on whether they do provide a public space for these people or whether they do not?
If you allow a public space, I mean, basically what you can say is that's the designated area for people to go. So if someone is not in the designated area, then you can say that they couldn't be there under the camping guidelines. So basically what you're saying is we are providing a location for you to go. And this is what Salem has done recently, is designated areas to try to put those individuals who are unsheltered into one area, and then at that point you can say other areas are not allowed. So if we wanted to designate an area, we could do that. It would just be a matter of making sure that it would have enough room to adequately house and space the people that would be there. But that comes with other complications and issues as well. So and that's what we're seeing, and that's what's happening in some of these areas who are trying this and haven't been as successful. So,
And then I'm guessing you probably run into complications if your designated area is full, and then there's nowhere else for them to go, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and dealing with other activities, criminal mischief, drug use, other things like that. So. I know a couple of the areas that Salem has designated that had other issues in, and so it creates sort of its own ecoculture and challenges potentially as well. So, and ultimately, I think one of the challenges with that is you're still, as Chief talked about, you're trying a holistic approach where you're trying to help people get services and get assistance and to provide them the opportunity to address the systematic cause of the issue, not just transfer the issue from one location to another, if you will.
Got it. Thank you.
Other questions or thoughts on this one? This is a discussion item. It will come back, as we know.
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Patty. I wasn't going to bring this up, but so what would be the civil liability incurred upon the city for designating an area like that? If something was to happen there, I mean, wouldn't that liability then fall upon us since we've created that?
Yes, I mean, we're not really talking about that tonight. I really wanted to get into what the legal aspects, so that the council had an understanding of what challenges are and what tools we have in our tool belts and what limitations we have, and to make sure we set proper expectations on what the city could and couldn't do. But yes, I mean, when you're starting to look into designating areas, it opens up a whole other set of issues and challenges, and you should be aware of that. And then also, it could, create other legal aspects and challenges. And I think one of the challenges other communities are having, and I keep saying that word because it's true, is proper policing and maintaining and keeping the area free of other issues and crimes. So, that's an option, and we can definitely explore it if you want to. But I would say that is not a panacea per se of solving this problem. But it could make an area, and then also finding an area designated. I know certain areas that they've tried to designate as the area. You get people in the community who don't want to see those areas become the location. So start to think of where would you want to say in the city we would want to put the designated area, right? And how do we deal with that? So, not saying it can't be done. I just want to kind of put in your minds the challenges that creates as well.
Yeah, I didn't want to look into that at all. I just want to make sure that we're all aware of the burden that it would place upon the city if we were to pursue that kind of option.
It would be challenging.
Okay. Other thoughts, questions? Okay. Are we ready to move on? Let's go ahead. Yeah. Thank you, Keith. Next item is a establishment of a public arts commission. And let's see, who's on? Alyssa?
I think Dan is
Yeah, okay.
that one, so I'm gonna disappear.
And this has a decision on it, so that'll be okay. Dan, where are you, sir?
I am here. Good evening,
There he
Mr.
is.
Mayor, members of the council.
There he is. Okay.
I will start while saying, while I am leading off this discussion, this staff report is from two other members of the management team, and I hope they feel free to jump in on the discussion, and they may be more appropriate to answer some questions than I will be. But the issue before you this evening is whether the city should establish a public arts commission that would be charged with the approval of any public art within the city, and more broadly with managing the city's public art collection, which, not that we have a substantial collection now, but the idea is that it will be growing over time. There is public sculpture at the library, for instance. There are murals painted on the sides of buildings. And there is a statutory obligation upon the city when we do new or improved public buildings with a budget above a certain amount, that a certain percentage of the budget be dedicated to public art. So that's a possibility in the future. As you heard in the public comment at the beginning of this evening's meeting, this issue is before you because staff has received a request for the installation of small works of art on the public sidewalk and on city-owned buildings. When staff was first approached with the idea, we were generally uncomfortable that it would be up to staff to be reviewing these works of art. And we began the process of talking about who is it that should be responsible for reviewing and approving works of art that will be placed in the city. As a result of that, we researched what other cities have done. We looked at the code from about 10 other cities in Oregon. What you have attached to the staff report is based mostly, I would say, on the city of Ashland's code that seemed to be very comprehensive compared to some of the others that we looked at. We're here tonight really to have this discussion with you. We did not place the suggested language in an ordinance for you to consider, but really wanted to have the discussion with you at a sort of on a policy level of whether this is a direction you wanted to go, and be able to answer your questions and hear your concerns before we created an ordinance. In very brief summary, what we've placed before you is the creation of a new public arts commission that would consist of 5 members that have some interest, education, expertise in public art. They would serve in an advisory capacity to the council, to the planning commission, to the Parks and Recreation Board, and would be given the responsibility for reviewing proposals for the installation of works of art on public property. With that, I will stop. If other members, if Lance or Keith want to chime in, this would be the opportunity for them to do so. Otherwise, we'll answer any questions and we'll listen to what you have to say and come back if you wish with an ordinance, either with the language that you have in front of you or modified as appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Keith, who else is on that? Let's see. Keith was for sure. Thoughts?
I'm here, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I guess I'll say that, we had conversations with RDS. I was trying to look up in my email, but I would say it was about 14 or 15 months ago, where they initially came with this idea. We said at the time that if they wanted to use public right-of-way or city buildings, that we felt like an arts commission was the way to go. We hadn't heard anything from them again until I think January 18th is what was said. At that point, staff again felt like, well, if they were looking for us to do this for public right-of-ways and public buildings, that we would need to look for something that wasn't just us. We felt like that was inappropriate, and an arts commission would be a more appropriate term of doing that. So even in our initial conversations, if they wanted to go this route, we said an arts commission was what we want, and we didn't take any further action because we hadn't heard from RDS for approximately, Dan, you might correct me if I'm wrong, but about 14 or 15 months.
Yeah, it was maybe 6-8 weeks ago that we heard from them after at least a year.
Right.
I knew that they were continuing to work on the sidewalk art project from my participation in their board meetings, but I don't think there was any formal communication from them or even informal communication directly with the city other than the discussions at their board meeting.
And honestly, the other thing I guess I'll say is, and we had this conversation as well, if this was something that was being done on private property, we as a city wouldn't necessarily have any say or per se input. It was really the component that added the public property and the public right-of-ways that really sparked us to say this is the route to go. And we as a staff agreed this would be the best manner forward and the appropriate way to handle and do these.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Chris.
Hey, Keith, real quick point of clarification. So at the beginning of the public testimony, Steve was talking about how there were public works for safety, permissions, appropriateness of content. So my question is, and I know that we'll talk more about this if we decide to go forward with an ordinance, but is the intent to have this art commission do all of that legwork, or is all of that work going to be done before it goes to the art commission? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean,
in other words, going to work for safety and talking to the building owners, is all that going to be done prior to?
Yeah, I think one of the points of clarification I'll make is in the initial conversation that we had over a year ago, this was an idea they were formulating, and we were giving ideas of, depending on what they wanted to do, of suggestions of what we wanted. I would say it would be inappropriate to call that, this is what we told them they needed to do. This was ideas of, depending on what they wanted it to look like. What we'd really like to do is to let the Arts Commission be the one that would take over looking at that and have the oversight. We really don't want staff to determine what is art. It's the old Supreme Court Potter, Supreme Court Justice Potter. I don't want to get into us making a determination. So as they came forward and said this is what we wanted, and we looked at what the proposal was that they submitted in January, the idea was let's really put all of this into an arts commission and let them be the oversight committee on something like this. Dan, do you want to add anything to that? Or Lance?
The only thing that I would add is as drafted, this language does not give them the ultimate approval authority. But if you look in paragraph F10 under responsibilities, it is to review and make a recommendation to the council regarding approval and acceptance of art to be donated. And it would ultimately be the council's responsibility after getting that input from the commission.
I would just like to say that before it went to the Art Commission, Public Works would look at the proposal to make sure that they are not proposing something that's unsafe. For example, slippery paint on sidewalks, things like that, that the city could be held liable for if someone to slip and fall. So we'd be looking at that type of situation, but the art itself would be forwarded on to the Arts Commission.
Thank you, Lance. Hey, let me ask the council a question real quick. What's your favorite, each one of you, what's your favorite piece of public art? I know what mine is. You ever been to Silverton? Norman Rockwell's Four Freedoms? Ever see that, anyone? All of you know, all of you young people know what the Four Freedoms are? Wow, I guess I'm dating myself again. Anyway, that's my favorite. I thought it was wonderful. I'm not sure it's still up. It may have faded and they took those murals down, but beautiful stuff.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
have you ever been to Baltimore,
No.
Maryland?
No.
Well, down on their docks, when you walk around, they have these large crabs, and they're probably like my body length long. And then you walk around different areas, and different people decorated them. So some have murals on them, some are like orange with purple polka dots. And
Whoa. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I've never been there. One of my ancestors partly settled the area in the 1630s, though.
Oh, cool.
I should go look at that. I don't think he's remembered, but it's been a while. Anyone else? Sublimity as public art. That blacksmith shop on at one time was the old post office, and then was the telephone company owns the building, I think. But that's a fairly recent piece of public art. What else is there? Okay, well, trying to stir some discussion and thinking here about this. Okay, other.
Jefferson has fire hydrants all over the city that are painted.
All right. Okay. Public art. I bet the Gus would like that. Like that.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
I wasn't sure where Steve said that RDS was in the process of speaking to the city. Keith, can you talk about that? But then also, so my question is, are we trying to get this art commission up and running before we talk about RDS's art that they want to do?
Yes, I know Dan had some conversations with RDS specifically that, this would be the route to go, and that, Dan, you can say, because you had the conversations, but, we could get this up and running before they could really get this installed after the rainy season. So April or May timeframe to allow this to go through a proper process. So they were aware of what we were trying to do. We've tried to move fairly quickly from the time that they came forward and said formally that they wanted to do this. And I wasn't aware they were still having discussions on this. I hadn't had any communication or on that. So, we're trying to be respectful, but we're also trying to make sure we do this right. And they understood what it was, and we felt like we could get this done in a time frame that would make all parties happy. They may not want to go through the Arts Commission, I can't say, but we felt like that was the right path to go forward on.
Okay.
And follow up, Dan, so you have been in discussions with them, so does like the timeline of, I just don't know the art that they were talking about, like do they have an anticipated time frame that they're looking at trying to get this this done? And do you think that, I guess what I'm getting at is this something that can be presented to the council, and then we can just make a decision on, because really the art commission is just one more step. But if it's a time sensitive matter, he's talking about like something to do with the poles and the heart walk. I'm gonna say that wrong. Hearts that they have on the poles. You know what I'm talking about?
I've never seen the banners on the poles or the Valentine's hearts as public art. I hadn't thought that that activity would be, shall we say, regulated under this ordinance. I had some correspondence with RDS in December, and that was, as we said earlier, the first time in many, many months that they had come to the city with the proposal. Their previous conversations had been mostly with Keith and Lance. I wrote back and said, you know, as we had said before, staff thinks there ought to be this Public Arts Commission, and we will get to work on getting it done. About maybe 10 days or 2 weeks ago, I did get an email essentially saying, here's our application to do the sidewalk art. After they were told, here's the process we're going to go through to set up the Arts Commission, and that we would have it on the council agenda very soon. So if the council is interested in pursuing this, we can have an ordinance in front of you in 2 weeks at your next meeting. And then we put out the word to try to find people to serve on the commission. As far as the sidewalk art project, unless we have a very unusually dry spring, it's not going to be late April, mid-May before they can start that project, just due to the weather constraints of trying to paint during the rainy season.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dean.
And just one more question, Mr. Mayor. This is to my fellow councilors. So I mean, it's basically up to us. Do we want to hear what RDS wants to do and try to make a decision about it before we make this art council? Because we can still do both. Or is it something that we want to set up this process and then have them go through the process? Discussion on that.
Question for the council, yeah.
I guess I'll add in here. I mean, when we had discussions with them 15 or 16 months ago, we said if we wanted to go forward using right of way and using public property, that we would need to go for an arts commission. They've now created this sense of urgency, and I would advise the council not to get caught up in that. We should still do what we said we were going to do 15 or 16 months ago when we had this conversation. So, I mean, I think that's why we're doing it this way. You know, if time was a consideration, they could have come to us 6 months, 8 months ago, 10 months ago, a year ago, and said, let's move this. So I do want to say I'm disappointed that we're now making this like, let's move forward, you know, an emergency on their part, when really we're moving as quickly as we've had information given to us to actually address this. And they knew from the very first conversation, regardless of what Steve said about other things they're going to do, if this is the route we were going to go, this is the route we should follow as a city.
I understand that. I see it as, I mean, I'm not going to pretend to know what they were doing or why they haven't reached out to you. I mean, we've had a lot of stuff going on and a lot of hurdles, extra hurdles to jump through, all of us. And I could say that, you know, I could see that being the same for the members of RDS too. It's just a question of how we want to approach this. That's all.
Okay.
That's all I got.
But the suggestion is Arts Commission first, then consider proposals. Right, Keith?
I would say yes, and it even goes back to Dan's comment. RDS wants to be a good partner. They can be a good partner with us, and to receive here's our application when we explain to them what our process was is disappointing, I guess is the word I will use. So,
well, aren't you on the board with RDS? Have they been having discussions about this? So I would assume that at least one city staff member had known about it.
Yes, I was at board meetings where the project was discussed. I occasionally would raise the issue of when it seemed like they were going forward of, gee, have you been back in touch with, I said the Public Works Department, because that's who they had been in touch with originally. So, they were reminded that they need to be working with the city. But I don't think they reached out to the city until maybe early December.
Okay.
I'd have to go back into my email records to see when that contact came.
Okay.
So what would you folks like to do with this?
Does anybody else have any thoughts or feelings about this? You just all are just sitting there. So.
Oh, I do. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Couple thoughts. I think our commission is a good idea. I have a couple, I guess, questions. I think I'm looking through the details here in the outline. I think I would like to see under probably the standards and rules section that members of the commission not be members of any organizations that may be submitting projects. Just kind of conflicts of interest exclusion there. Not that Steve or anybody else in particular would do that, but I wouldn't want to see that kind of thing. And then I also I have a little bit of hesitancy just because I don't know if we're creating this commission just for RDS because they're the only ones that would submit this kind of project, or do we have instances of other individuals or groups that are interested in submitting art projects for the city as well?
Okay, thank you, Ben.
I'll try to answer that last question about other groups. I don't think staff is aware at the moment of other public art projects that may be out there. However, there have been in recent years, the last 4 or 5 perhaps, discussions of, for instance, painting something in the public street at an intersection downtown. There was an effort a few years ago to try to get, for lack of a better term, some Silverton style murals painted around the city. There is sculpture at the library that I have no idea when, how it appeared, what process there was, or whether a former library director said, oh yeah, let's buy that, or let's accept that gift. So having a public body set up to sort of oversee, curate, manage the city's art collection, as well as provide recommendations to the council for the acceptance of new acquisitions, to me, makes sense, rather than leaving it to a public works director to say, oh yeah, that works here. Or the library director to say, yes, we'll take that sculpture and put it in the garden behind the library.
I'll answer the question too for Councilor McDonald. I think since I've been here, there's been numerous efforts to try to get public art. So my hope with this commission is that it would provide a better avenue and better resources and maybe advocacy and support for places that want to do that. And Dan's mentioned several of them, but it has been a common subject matter throughout the city, talking about the crabs in Baltimore. Different cities have done different projects like that. Kansas City did cows. So, I think there's other forms. I've been in downtowns where they have public arts commissions where they put sculptures and works of art in downtown and they're for sale. So, those have been discussed. So I think there's been a lot of smoke with this, just never quite the fire. And I hope this would be an avenue to maybe help facilitate that.
Do we think that we really need a 5-member commission, or could we get away with 3? I don't know. I'm just kind of concerned about finding enough people to fill those spots, I guess.
Council McDonald, that was going to be my next question. What do we do? We make this commission. So I guess one of my thoughts is we have people in the community that are trying to the city wanted to do or get people involved in art, and that didn't work. But now we have people who actually want to be involved and try to get the artwork done. I just don't want to see that that fizzle out. I would like to help and help them and keep that momentum going. It keeps people busy. It can be something exciting that we can talk about. And so I'd like, especially right now when, stuff kind of sucks. So, just to kind of keep that momentum going. And then my concern would be, we say, oh, you have to wait till we get this commission. And we're trying to get people on it. You see what you're saying, Councilor McDonald, about like conflicts of interest, but that could, that could be a little, the pool of people who actually want to volunteer for something like that, and then the instance where they might be also involved in a group that would want to participate in something like this could certainly overlap. So that's a concern, but then the biggest concern is waiting to fill those positions and then getting that going and then having this project fizzle out. So Keith, I appreciate and I understand your concerns. And that's, yeah, it's just my thoughts.
I'm sorry, I was looking away there for a second, working in Zoom. Jana Mosier wants to say something. So Jan, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Hey, Ben, I was thinking about your question, Councilor McDonald, and there's a pretty strong history of art in Stayton. We've had a very successful art show at the library for several years now, and I would be surprised if you couldn't get 5 people to fill that board. There's a deep past and a lot of history there, and I would be surprised if that was a problem here.
Well,
I can't guarantee you, but I'd be really surprised.
Fair enough. Okay, good. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Patty.
Yes, go ahead, David.
2 things. One, I want to start off by answering your initial question, and that is, I find the public art on 2nd and High very, very nice. It's aesthetically pleasing. It's kind of fading over the years. I've noticed that. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it's the sun and it's kind of the fields, and I know the intention, or at least I've heard the intention of it, was to kind of encapsulate everything going on with Stayton, right? And I find that visually appealing. And I know from some other community members that they don't share that opinion. Being as that I'm a novice to art and I appreciate what I see and I like it, I don't think I'm the best person to ask about public art. So that's why I was really excited to see that we're finally forming up this Public Arts Commission. And to be honest with you, and I hear you, Councilor Ort, about your concerns with RDS and this ongoing or upcoming project. But I really would like to see us start moving forward with something on this. And I would like to see staff personally bring back an ordinance. So if there's no more questions, I would actually like to move on to make a motion here.
Okay. Let's ask if there's any more questions or thoughts.
I'll add one comment. I'll share a story. When I was getting my master's in public administration, I had a professor who was a well-known political professor, gets quoted in national news media and involved in a lot of political campaigns. And he said, "Here's my best advice I could ever give you: never ever be on an arts commission." So, because it goes back to what Council Patty talked about. What is art and what what people enjoy and don't enjoy. So subjective. And I think that's why having an arts commission is a good thing, just to have that avenue. And I do agree with what Janice said. I think there's been a lot of smoke. I'm hoping this commission, beyond what sparked us to come forward, if you will, really brings out those folks who would like to see more public art beyond just even the scope of RDS.
Yep. And Keith, I can find, I guess, kind of a promise to the group. I can find 5 people who will serve on this, maybe by next meeting. But that's up to you folks. By the time we wrangle it a little bit, it will take a while, but we could get it going. Promise that. Okay, David.
Well, if I could just say, I'd like to thank, if any of you RDS people are watching, I'd like to thank you all for your continued involvement in our community and just trying to make us the best that we can be, and for getting us pushed in this direction to make this commission. So even if you have to wait a little bit longer, it sounds like, than you want to at the moment, hopefully once we get this commission going, then you'll bring your art to it and we can get that going.
Okay, good, thank you. Back to you, David Patty.
All right, well, I just want to say thank you, Councilor Ord. I agree with you. I encourage all you folks to continue to engage in this process and make Stayton a better place to live. That's one of our goals for sure. So I move that we request staff to prepare an ordinance incorporating the proposal to establish an arts commission as presented.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second, Councilor Mullen.
All right, thank you, Councilor. I've got a motion and a second to request the staff to prepare an ordinance incorporating the proposals, given proposals to establish an arts commission as presented. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I just.
Councilor, go ahead.
I don't even know how to say exactly what I want to say, but maybe regardless of like personal feelings that like different people have with different people in the community, like RDS really is trying really hard. And I really think that should be acknowledged sometimes. So that's all I got.
I think you have this evening, and that's fine. Good job. Any other discussion, please? Okay, Alyssa, would you poll the council on this, please?
Sure. Councilor Ort?
Yes.
Councilor Mullen?
Yes.
Councilor Patty?
Yes.
And Councilor McDonald?
Yes.
All right, motion passes 4-0.
Okay, thank you, folks. All right, the next thing then is a temporary policy to allow eating and drinking establishments to use the street right of way. The staff report, any one of you gentlemen that wants to take this one on, Keith or Dan or Lance or Chief, go ahead, please.
I again will start off, but again stress that this staff report and resolution is a joint effort from planning, public works, police, and administration. So it may be that if you have questions, there'll be someone else who's better prepared to answer them than myself. But as you heard earlier, and as you are well aware, at the current time, our eating and drinking establishments are restricted to takeout only, with provisions that do allow for outdoor dining. The proposal that is in front of you is a resolution that would set up policy that would allow eating and drinking establishments to use the parking aisle of city-maintained streets for seating for customers for as long as the COVID emergency restrictions are in place and that they are restricted from having full occupancy indoors of their establishments. Similar to the last discussion, staff looked at policies that were in place in a number of communities, picked and chose what we thought were the best aspects of them. We did coordinate with the Stayton Fire District to make sure that they were on board, and would not have included them otherwise. The resolution or the policies that are in place limit the space that is used to that which is immediately in front of the business, unless the business receives the written consent of the neighboring businesses to extend in front of them. Does require a permit from the Public Works Department without any fee. Does require tents and heaters to be reviewed by the Stayton Fire District for safety. The fire district has said that they will review plans and will also do inspections of anything that once it is put in place. Reiterates that any alcohol service must be in conformance with LCC regulations, that the policies are in place as long as seating restrictions are indoors are in place from the state, and says that even once those restrictions are in place, that we will give the businesses 30 days notice before the use of the right-of-way is terminated. So even after the governor's office or OHA issues, shall we say, the all clear sign, that the businesses would have an additional 30 days to continue to use their space. Specifically to address one of the comments from the chamber in their written, they asked for the resolution to include seating on the sidewalk. The reason it was not included in this resolution is that back in October of 2019, the council passed Ordinance 1038, which set up a process to allow seating on the sidewalk for sidewalk cafes, or not just seating, but sidewalk cafes, and also shops to display merchandise on the sidewalk. And already the city has in place a permit process for that. So that's not necessary to be covered under these policies. And I will point out that this past June, when the council enacted the annual resolution setting the schedule of fees, that because of the COVID situation, the fee for that sidewalk permit was set at $0. I won't say it was waived, but you set the fee at $0 for that permit. With that, I or the other department heads are available to answer any questions that you may have.
Dan, I would like to, before we go any further, I'd like to add on to, I believe it was the chamber that also said something about using public works barricades, and that just will not be possible. We don't have enough barricades. The last time that we actually lent barricades out, we had a fire downtown and we didn't have enough barricades to barricade the street off for the fire department. So at that point, we decided we just don't have enough barricades to lend out, so that won't be possible. I just thought I'd throw that out before we went any further.
Okay, thank you, Lance.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, so I'd like to hear from the chief. We've had conversations about right of way and public safety in the past. And so I just would like to kind of hear his opinion on the ordinance, the proposal.
Okay.
Hello. Yeah, based on the ordinance and the way that the streets are designed, where this would actually have an effect and stuff, I don't really have a traffic flow concern. I think the one thing that we need to make sure that we keep in mind with it too was that there was a pathway on sidewalks for pedestrian traffic. We get a lot, especially where this ordinance is going to take effect. Essentially, we're looking at the downtown corridor. So, and with the parking, I don't think it's going to create a hazard for the motoring public and or the pedestrians that are in the area.
Mr. Mayor, quick follow-up.
Go ahead.
Any concerns with the business to business relationships where some business might be able to use other business? The communications going on there, or how that might need to be policed a little bit. In other words, somebody's infringing in somebody else's area. Any concerns there?
I think from a law enforcement standpoint, there's always a concern there. I mean, that's our businesses being neighborly to each other and being business friendly with each other and being respectful of that. I think the ordinance is pretty specific. I don't have it in front of me. They can only basically border that property line that they have there, so we shouldn't have that interference. If we do, I think the ordinance addresses that for us to be able to take action or at least ask for a correction from those neighboring businesses.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
Other questions for Chief?
Yeah, I have one, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, go ahead.
My day job, safety is pounded into our head every day. It's priority 1 through 5. And my only concern is about the safety of patrons in those areas if we're not going to have real solid barricades. I don't know how much concern police department has or that the city has about just safety for those people sitting there around potentially inches from road traffic, around what we can do about that or what our liabilities may be in that case.
Yeah, Councilor McDonald, how I would respond to you on that one is, the barricades are just going to be a visual. We're talking vehicles. If a vehicle is going to go through something, that's not going to stop. It's more of a visual, obstruction, a visual cue. I think if you're taking this type of responsibility and that you want to do that as a business, obviously, from what Lance said, we don't have the resources to provide. So that'd be something that, we would look at, or the businesses need to look at if they're going to take that type of action, to go outside. To be honest with you, I keep pretty close eye on the news like everybody else, things going on. I miss stuff. I don't recall an incident so far, with Portland or some of the other jurisdictions where they've had, I think, an issue. There probably has been, you're going to, but I don't see that being a huge issue that's been brought up. Our downtown corridor is also a slow speed area. It really is a low speed. So stopping distances are going to be far shorter than if this was somewhere where we had a 35-mile-an-hour zone or something. It wouldn't even be reasonable. It'd be something we wouldn't want to do. But, it's low speed. People are good. We don't usually have too many crashes in that downtown area in the past. You got 4-way stops, so your speeds are going to be going from slow and then slowly increasing because of the way of the design. So I think it's a pretty low threshold in regards to the safety, but I love the question. It's great.
Thank you. Other questions for Chief or any of our other staff that were involved in this?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Patty. I have a question for Dan.
Go ahead.
So going back to what you said on line item G, is there anything we can do to streamline that permit process that kind of assists with the immediacy of some of this necessity to have outdoor dining? And what I mean by that is there a significant review process currently that prohibits merchants from having that outdoor seating on a sidewalk as far as the review process? Is there anything we can do to just make that easier on the merchants who are trying to do that in a way that is consistent with the ordinance that we already have in place?
The ordinance that we have in place only addresses seating on the sidewalk. It does not address seating in the parking aisle of the street. As far as I know, no one has applied for a permit under the sidewalk seating regulations that were passed last year. So I can't answer, what the review process, how long it takes, because no one has applied.
Okay. So it sounds like there's already a mechanism that allows merchants to go ahead and take care of that issue in a way that is best for the city and what is already on the books. I guess is what I'm trying to get and highlight to the chamber is, hey, apply for a permit if this is what you're looking to do. So thank you.
Well, I think, Dan, we're talking about we're apples and oranges there. There's a sidewalk permit, and then there will be a right-of-way permit for what the tents are. And I think, are you talking about the tents, David?
Nope, I'm talking about the sidewalks. But
okay,
thanks.
Very good. I was just going to say, with the tents, it will be like a right-of-way permit, and we will expedite those through when they come in. 24 hours, they'll be out of our office. Fantastic. But I think the number one thing is what Chief had talked about, and we'll be looking for is safety. While I think it's a low likelihood that we have any issues with traffic and tents, there's still a risk factor there. So we'll be looking at that very hard, and maybe we can add some additional resources to that to try to protect. That's what we'll be looking at.
Thank you.
And if I may, I've had conversations with several restaurant owners downtown. I would say that the likelihood of someone putting up a tent is fairly small. What they're interested in is fair weather seating. Mm-hmm. We'll see. I do know that there is one establishment that is interested in tent, but they've been trying to get it in a city-owned parking lot rather than in the parking strip of the street, and they do not appear interested in having their patrons in the front in the street. They want them in the back in the parking lot.
Dan, was any provision made for that particular request?
Provision in this resolution was made to not allow. For this resolution only addresses using the parking aisle of the street right of way. The model from the city on which we based this resolution also addressed the use of public parking lots, but staff made the decision to remove that from this resolution.
Okay. All right, thank you. Other questions and thoughts here?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
And does the sidewalk ordinance, can you refresh our memory? So that allows for seating on the sidewalk, but they wouldn't be able to put up a tent on the sidewalk?
That is correct.
Okay. So one of the big differences between these two is that ability. So in the right of way, they'd be able to put up the overhead structure and whatnot, as opposed to, I was thinking of G, and if maybe it could reference that or that other ordinance. I don't know if that's so that people would know that they could, if you want to do this, you need to get a permit. I don't know. I think that was the confusion that probably the Chamber of Commerce had, was they saw that and they said, oh, well, we're not allowed to do that, not realizing that there was another ordinance. So
that's right. I mean, what G says is this permit does not authorize the placement of furniture or fixtures on the public sidewalk.
Yes.
There are other permits that are available to do that.
Okay.
When I get an electrical permit, that doesn't mean I can go do plumbing. I need to go get a plumbing permit for plumbing.
Oh,
I get that.
okay.
I'm just wondering if it should reference that other ordinance.
That when you make
we
the
can do
motion
that.
to adopt this resolution, if you do so to modify it, it will
Okay.
be inserted.
Okay, so going back to Crystal with Making Moms was talking about, she submitted a video. Do we have access to that video of where I'm going to assume that that's the business that wants to use the parking lot
Behind the business, right?
behind the business. Can you kind of give us some thoughts on why staff decided not to go that route?
I was not aware of a video. I have not seen it.
I'll add, I hadn't received anything. We received just only the request to provide public comment this evening. So I'm not sure about the video. And then Keith is going to pop on here to answer the other part.
When we were looking at this ordinance, we were focused on trying to do the right of way in front of the businesses. We didn't want to start using public parking spots. We didn't want to get into trying to portion that off or any sort of issues going forward. So we really looked to make this narrowly focused and right in front of the businesses. So we had a lot of communication with Making Moms. They understood what our position was going to be on this. We looked at the equity of that for another issue, and it really was pretty limited on the equity. So this was an equity issue of doing it so that it would be in front of each business and they would each have the same opportunity and the same benefit. So that was really the reason why we went with that as a proposal and why staff decided not to include that. Dan, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I don't have anything more on that.
Okay. All right. Anything else before we move in some direction? We've got some options. It's resolution 1016. And you can see the options there on page 2 of the memorandum. What would you folks like to do, if anything, tonight?
Mr. Mayor, I would go ahead and make a motion to approve resolution 1016 as presented.
Is there a second? Okay, motion dies for lack of a second. What else would you folks like to do?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah. Yes.
I'd like to move to request staff to prepare an ordinance incorporating the proposal. Oh wait, I'm looking at the wrong one. Where am I? Woo!
Go to resolution 1016, Counselor.
Yeah, I went over to the Art Commission one. Hold on.
That's fine.
Okay. Move to approve resolution 1016 with the following changes. I don't know specifically how you want to wordsmith this, Dan, but I just want on G just to reference the other ordinance, C blah, blah, blah ordinance for sidewalk cafe rules or something like that.
What I would do is in paragraph G, between the two sentences that are there, add a sentence in parentheses that says that sidewalk cafes may be permitted under chapter 5.52 of Stayton Municipal Code.
Perfect.
Wow.
Is that what,
I'll
is that what
second.
you moved?
Pretty good. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've got a motion to approve resolution 1016 with modifications, which have been enumerated and read into the record. Is there any other discussion, folks? Okay.
I'd just like to say that I'm happy to see that we can try to be as accommodating as we can with our business community. So thank you, all of you.
Yep. Absolutely. Good point. Well, go, if nothing else, go ahead, Alyssa. Would you pull the council on this, please?
Yes. Counselor Patty?
Yes.
Counselor McDonald?
Yes.
Counselor Ort?
Yes.
And Counselor Mullen?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 4-0.
Okay. Let's see. Next thing is, let's see, what does it say? A notice of approval for a marijuana licensed retailer. Who wants to take that? Somebody on the staff.
Yeah, Dave is going to step in here.
Okay, good, good.
Hello again. What you have in front of you is a memo in regards to a new marijuana dispensary that we approved that is OLCC licensed and has hit all of the requirements under our ordinance and has been approved, and I believe is probably open at this time.
Hey, Chief, what's the address on that, please?
And I knew you were going to ask me, and I didn't have the. It's on the memo.
How about general location?
It's Martin Drive, but I can't think of the actual numbers. The 3. Sorry, I'm letting you down.
The address
Yeah.
is 2420 Martin Drive.
There we go.
Which is close to what?
Right next to the liquor store and across from the Arco gas station.
Okay, thank you. That's fine.
In Dairy Queen.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, that's good. Any questions on that? Council?
Mr. Mayor, I guess not necessarily on that one. I know that we had talked about what is his name? Greed and Justice had come in last week or 2 weeks ago to talk to us about. Sorry, I just swallowed wrong. The boundaries of our dispensaries. Where are we on with that?
Council, we're still working on that document. So yeah, I figured I was gonna take over for you right there real quick. So we are working on, the staff's working on a draft proposal to give to you guys probably first of next month. Okay. I got that thumbs up. We're good. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chief.
You bet.
Okay, so we're good with that, I guess. That's a good one. I'd like, as we sort of finish up the evening here, I'd like to ask the council's affirmation of reappointment of Brent Walker to the Budget Committee. He's served for at least the last 2 years, maybe the last 4. Business owner, good Budget Committee member. So I'd like to ask the council's affirmation of my reappointment of him. And
Aye.
Agreed.
We can go to a formal vote or just a simple affirmation is fine. Certainly. Yeah.
Yeah. A motion to ratify the mayor's appointment.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to ratify the mayor's appointment of Brent.
Second.
Good one.
Brent Walker.
Second? Yeah, Brent Walker, right. Okay. There was a second to that motion. Okay, and so Alyssa, ask everyone, would you please?
Yes. Counselor McDonald?
Yes.
Counselor Mullen?
Yes.
Counselor Patty?
Yes.
And Counselor Ort?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 4-0.
Okay. Last thing I've got this evening, unless there are communications from the council to the staff or from the staff to the council, I want to share this little thing with you. I got this as an email, and I'm sure this was sent to every community in the state, certainly every mayor. This is from a man named David Vorman, Vrooman, and he is a member of the USS Oregon, which is a fast attack submarine, SSN number 973. And submarines have traditionally been given numbers because they're not ships, they're boats. And he's on the commissioning committee. The fast attack submarine Oregon, currently under construction at General Dynamics in Groton, Connecticut. I don't think that's Groton, I think it's Groton, is the first naval vessel named for our great state since the USS Oregon, which was BB-3, was commissioned and placed in service on the 15th of July, 1896. The mission of the commissioning committee is to raise funds to support the boat that proudly carries the name of our state. These funds will be used to provide the traditional events of commissioning that the Navy is not allowed to provide, such as the commanding officer's reception, the commissioning chairman's reception, the post-commissioning reception. As a result of the current events taking place, fundraising is lagging behind our expectations. For this reason, I'm appealing to you for help. A personal donation from you and your staff, along with other help, would go a long way in helping us achieve our goal. And then he's got a reply. And I thought it was kind of neat, being a longtime fan of the original USS Oregon and its wild dash around South America to get to Cuba in time to take on the Spanish fleet there in 1898. And I just thought I'd share that with you. I don't know how a person would want to do this. I guess on an individual basis, I probably cannot pry loose any money out of city coffers for this. So just a thought, just something to share with you on a cold, wet February evening. Any thoughts on this or anything else this evening? Anything else anyone needs to share?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Petty.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of thoughts on that, and I apologize. I'm not too familiar with submarines. So I will say, though, I appreciate Brent Walker's continued devotion to the Finance Committee, and I just want to thank anybody who's interested in these positions and taking the time to do them, especially now. And I would also encourage the general public at large to continue applying for these positions. These committees and commissions, they help us do our job and make good policy that all of Stayton supports. And so thank you to Mr. Walker and others.
Alyssa, are there any vacant slots on the budget committee?
Yes, so there is at least one more that is sitting vacant right now.
Okay.
And there's one other member who's up for renewal that I haven't heard back from. So I'll be following up on that. We do have several positions on our Parks and Recreation Board. I'll put that plug out there again. We did get some interest after putting it up on Facebook, but we haven't yet received applications back. So just putting that out there again, that there are still vacancies there also.
All right, thank you. Thank you for pursuing that. All right. So, is there anything else this evening? Go ahead.
I can't remember.
Councilor Wright, go ahead.
I totally was going to say something and I forgot. Oh my goodness. Never mind, I guess. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's right here. Sorry. We got a public comment, and so two things. I want to thank all of you that have come on and participated in our meetings the last couple weeks. That kind of spices it up, and thank you for participating. Lets us know what your thoughts and feelings are, and so like Councilor Patty said, on our commissions and committees, it helps us make better decisions. So thank you for being a part of the process, and written testimony. So we have a written testimony regarding our neighborhood improvement grants. And so I know that we had applications go out for those, but is there any word that we're not doing those?
I can weigh in on that. Okay. So if you remember, I can't remember if it was in December or November, there was some discussion that you guys had wanted to put a hold on awarding those until we were able to see the budget actual.
Oh, yes.
And
okay.
So that's actually going to be coming at the next meeting.
Okay.
Susanna will be coming forward with a budget update. So
thank you for refreshing my memory on that. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else? Okay. Well, let's call it for tonight. It is 9 o'clock and meeting is adjourned. We'll see you next time. Thank you, folks, for your help, your support, and your involvement.